Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah Daf Zayin. So we're starting at the top at the Mishnah on the second line. But before we start, I want to just go back to one thing to correct. At the very end of yesterday's daf, there was a line that I didn't explain perfectly. We saw this Braita to support Rav Sheshet about that if there's Eidim somewhere else, then the waters don't work. Also, Taltala Schut, if the reason the Sotah waters didn't work is because she has some merits, but she's really guilty, then also it won't work. And then we also have this is the Sotah waters won't work if there are women who knew that the women talk at night when they're spinning their wool. When they're spinning, they gossip. And if the women all gossip about what happened and they all know what happened, then it's pretty clear that something happened, in which case the Sotah waters aren't going to work because it's a situation where it's already a known thing. And we need things, right? The Sotah is only in a case where we really don't know what happened. And this seems to be, even though we don't have real witnesses, everybody really knows that something happened there. Okay. Now we're going to start with the Mishnah. We're continuing in the process. Ketzad osel. So how does he do this? So now the husband is supposed to, right? He warned the woman. Then they were aiding that she was in a room alone. So now what does he have to do? He has to go prove this. So what does he do? He brings her to court. Okay, first of all, right, this is kind of airing out your dirty laundry in public, and this is another kind of instance where we see, and you're going to see the husband not only takes her to the court, but from there he's going to go with her to the temple. He can't just say, oh, you're guilty and you go deal with this, but he actually goes with her, which I think is another part of the process. It's humiliating for him as well. And I think that what's going on here, again, is a way that the rabbis wanted to ensure that this process really never happened. They didn't really want to ever get to this situation. And they make the husband be part of it and go, and you'll see it's even more embarrassing as we go along. So first he takes her to the local court and he shows them all the evidence. Doesn't say this in the Mishnah, but the point is he shows them the evidence he has, brings the witnesses, right? That's his evidence. And then they decide, okay, she's guilty enough to be able to start going through the process. At this point, he's forbidden to have relations with her. So therefore, if he has relations with his wife at this point, she doesn't drink the Sotah water. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen. That's number one. If it does, right, we're going to see now, is it more that we're worried we need to have witnesses so that we won't go continuing with this process? Again, a way to kind of prevent this process from ever happening. So they basically give him two Talmidei Chachamim, two Torah scholars who basically go with, so there's two Talmidei Chachamim, there's the man, the wife. We'll see exactly why they end up with these two Talmidei Chachamim, why they have to be Torah scholars also. And they protect kind of to make sure nothing goes on between the couple on the way and they don't have relations. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we trust the husband. We don't need to send people to make sure that he's not going to have relations with his wife. He's trusted on his own. Gemara is going to now get into these issues. So the first thing they do, they're going to try to prove two statements of Rav from our Mishnah. So the first one is they point out, okay, it's a numbers game. Trei v'iyu. They start counting. There's two men and him. Hatzlata. So there's three men. Lema Masea Leila, right? There's three men and one woman. Maybe this supports Rav. Lema Masea Leila Rav. Maybe this supports Rav's statement. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said the name of Rav. Lo shanu ela. When we talk about laws of yichud, you can't have one man alone with a woman. You can't have one man alone with two women because we're worried that the man might take advantage of the woman. But if you're two men with one woman, we're not worried because if one man tries to take advantage, there's another man and we're going to assume they're each kind of not going to let the other do anything. So now, kind of like a check thing, one won't do it because the other one's there. So now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, lo shanu ela be'il. This is only in the city where two men and one woman is enough. Aval baderech adi kashlosha. But when you're walking on the path, you need three. Why? If one goes to the bathroom. In the city, you can just kind of go to the bathroom behind a wall or something. Again, we're talking about men. Easier for them to just go wherever they want. But when you're out, you need to go off to the side so nobody sees you and you'll walk a little while. You'll leave the man alone with the woman and it'll be a problem of yichud, people being alone in a space where there's no one else around. So then one is going to end up in a yichud situation with this woman who's forbidden to him. To which they say, lo. No, that's not the reason why we have three here. We need, and here we're getting to again, why we need these people. This doesn't prove Rav's point that if you're out on the way, you need three. Now, the reason we have 3 here is so that there's witnesses if he ends up having relations with his wife. There's witnesses that see it, and then we're not going to go ahead and continue the Sotah process. To which they say, okay, well, from here you see, Talmidei Chachamim in Kule Amalo. Sounds like it's just Torah scholars, not regular people. Well, maybe this proves Rab's other point. Again, going back to this Yichud issue. This is only true for righteous people or kosher people, right? People who do good things, which are Talmidei Chachamim. Ava prutzim. But if they're people who are, in general, engaged in all sorts of inappropriate behaviors, afilu asara namilo. You can even have 10 men and 1 woman, and it still won't make a difference. In other words, it's still yichud. How do we know this? There was this terrible case that happened where they carried this woman out in a bed, meaning they made her look like she was dead. They took her out of the city as if to go bury her, and they raped her. Terrible story. And from here, you see the 10 bad people will do things in front of each other. They don't really care, right? This is what we call gang rape or something like that. To which the Gemara says, right? And obviously, Talmidei Chachamim aren't involved in that. Now, I say it obviously, which is not necessarily true, because we know that just because you're a Torah scholar doesn't mean you're exempt from, you're not going to be involved in inappropriate behaviors. Unfortunately, we see that happening in all sorts of situations. But at least, right, in the days of the rabbis, or maybe in their perspective, which could have been right, could have been wrong, people who were Talmidei Chachamim were not engaged in that kind of thing. To which the Gemara says, no, you can't use this to prove. Again, what we need here is 2. Okay, before we said it's 2 to witness. What happens here? We need 2 to warn. We need to warn them that, if you do this, it's forbidden, because we're going to see later also, it's a lotas. It's a negative commandment for him to sleep with the Sotah once he's already accused her. So we need 2 Talmidei Chachamim specifically to warn. You took the class that I gave not so long ago about the accidental murderer. Also there, when you murder someone accidentally and you run to the refuge city and the relatives are running after you, they also have 2 Talmidei Chachamim who come, and they're there. We talked in the course, it wasn't exactly clear why they were there. One of the reasons is they're there to warn the Goel Adam, the relative, that do you know that if you do this, if you kill the accidental murderer, he only did this by accident. You're not really allowed to kill him. And I think get into a whole discussion there, and they're there kind of to warn also. So it's very similar. Now continuing with the next words. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ba'alan eman aleh. Husbands believed, trusted. Why is he trusted? Well, Tanya, there's a brighter that says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ba'alan eman mikav hachomer. It's very logical. Why? Uman nidashi bekaret ba'alan eman aleha, sotashi belav lo kol sheken. A nida who is liable and gets karet, which is much more serious, and yet we trust the husband. He can be in a house alone with his wife when she's in her time of menstruating and can't be together with him. We don't worry, maybe he's going to sleep with his wife. And that's very serious. That's karet if he sleeps with her. But Sotah, she belav lo kol sheken, and again, it has relations. So a Sotah, all the more so, it's only a lotase. All the more so, we should trust the husband and don't need to set up protectors here to make sure that the couple doesn't engage in relations. Well, Rabbanan say, what are you talking about? Hianotenet. I'm going to flip your logic on its head. Nida is much more serious, which is why people who believe they're not going to end up having relations with their wives when they're in nida, because that's very serious. Sotah delav, Sotah is a less strict law. Lo chamira lev lo meheman. It's not as strict, and therefore maybe he will end up having relations with his wife, right? When things are very strict, people are very careful about it. When they're less strict, people aren't so careful. Rabbi Yehuda mikav hachomer. Yehuda is going to learn this from a kav hachomer. Sorry, that's it. So end of the Braita. In the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda learned it from a kav hachomer, and the rabbi said, your logic, we're going to flip it on its head. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute, Rabbi Yehuda mikav hachomer ma'itela? Rabbi Yehuda learned this from a kav hachomer? What are you talking about? How Rabbi Yehuda mikrai ma'itela? The Rabbi Yehuda learns it from a pasuk in the Torah. And how do we know this? Because we're going to show you from a Braita, Tanya. Now, this Braita is going to have 3 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda is only going to come at the end, so hold off. First, we see a Braita. According to the Torah, the man needs to bring his wife to the Kohen, to the temple. Mina Torah, ha'ish mevi et ishto. According to Torah law, all you need is the man bringing his wife. You don't need these 2 Talmidei Chachamim. Aval amru Chachamim, but the rabbis said, Mosrim lo shnei Talmidei Chachamim shema yavo ala b'derech. This whole thing of adding the Talmidei Chachamim is only rabbinic. In the Torah, it's really just the man, but rabbinic law says also Talmidei Chachamim. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ba'ala ne'eman aleh mikav hachomer. Rabbi Yossi, in this Braita, he's the one who brings the Kav HaChomer, and it's the same Kav HaChomer. Umani dashi b'kareit ba'ala ne'eman aleha, sotashi b'lav lo kol sheken. If Nida is so strict, and yet we believe the husband, and we trust him, we don't send messengers into his house to make sure he doesn't have relations with his wife. The Sotah, which is only a lota, say all the more, so we shouldn't need to set up messengers to make sure. Rulo, they said to him, now here they're going to knock it for a different reason. Nida will eventually be permitted, right? 7 days of Nida, and then she's permitted to her husband. Tomar b'Sotah she'ein laha heter, but Sotah will never be permitted to him. So why should that matter? Well, people are always tempted to do things that are forbidden. Forbidden waters are always sweeter. So, therefore, there's more of a concern with the Sotah than there is with the Nida. So that's the way the rabbis reject this Kav HaChomer argument. So far, we haven't even seen Rabbi Yehuda yet. Well, at the end of this Braita is Rabbi Yehuda Omer min haTorah ha'ish mevi et ishto ala kohen shene'emar ve'ha'ish ve'evia ish et ishto. So Rabbi Yehuda quotes the exact same pasuk as Tanakama. We're going to have to see how does he disagree with Tanakama, but right now, let's just go. And it says, he learned it from the pasuk, hevia ish et ishto. So why did it say before in the other Braita he learned it from a Kav HaChomer, and here it says he learned it from a verse in the Torah? Amar lahu, he said to them, Amar lahu Kav HaChomer bereisha u'parchua. He told them the Kav HaChomer in the beginning. Then they questioned him and knocked out the logic. And then Hadran Malu Krad, then he brought a pasuk. Once they knocked out his Kav HaChomer, then he went searching and found this pasuk. Now the Gemara asked that final question, Rabbi Yehuda Hainu Tanakama, but isn't Rabbi Yehuda the same as Tanakama? They both say the same thing. It's learned from the same verse. Difference between them is, according to the Tanakama, the rabbis then came and instituted that you have to have Talmidei Chachamim, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't think you ever need Talmidei Chachamim, even on a rabbinic level. So that's the difference between. Okay, new Mishnah. Continuing in the process. Now they take her to the Lishkat HaGazit, which is right outside the Azara in the temple. They start threatening her the same way they threaten witnesses who are coming forth, or I would say not threatening, but questioning very severely people who come forth and testify about death penalty cases. V'omer biti, they say, our daughter, like they speak to her very nicely. Harbe yayin say, harbe sloko say, wine causes all sorts of bad things to happen. Laughing and frivolity causes all sorts of bad things to happen. Harbe yalduto say, maturity causes things to happen. Harbe shchenim ha'ra'im osim l'fnei. Sometimes you end up with bad neighbors. Asi l'man shmo ha'gadol. Asi l'shmo ha'gadol shenichtab b'kedusha shelo yimachal ha'mayim. Do it for the name of God so it won't be erased in the water. In other words, all of these things are saying we understand that there's circumstances that might have caused your behavior. We understand it's okay, it happens. Please just come and admit. Don't make us erase God's name. This is the whole idea. We want to avoid the Sotah situation at all costs. We want to avoid getting into a situation where we erase God's name. So why don't you just come and admit that you did it? Well, and then they tell her things that better she not hear them, or her whole family. These are things that we don't really like to talk about. We're going to see what these are in the Gemara. We don't really know right now. Let's say she comes forward and admits. So now what happens? Well, she immediately has to get divorced from her husband. So she writes a shoval, which is a receipt, saying that I admitted in court that I was with someone. By doing that, I gave up my rights. I can't think of the word, but I gave up my rights to my ketubah money. And that's her shofar. So that if she ever tries to pull out her ketubah and say, hey, you never gave me my ketubah money, you divorced me, he'll pull out this receipt that she wrote that says, what do you mean? You gave up your rights to your ketubah money. So now the yotzeit, and then she's done, she's divorced. I mean, obviously she needs a get. Okay, he gives her a get. But if she says, no, I'm innocent, well, then we have to continue going through the process. So that was track 1. Now we're in track 2. Track 2 continues. So now they bring her up to the entrance, the eastern entrance to the temple, where first you go through the Har Bayit. Okay, she was already there, we're going to have to talk about, wasn't she already inside? She was in the Lishkat Gazit in the Beiti, and that was already right outside the Azara. Now we're going to take her out to the entrance to the Har Bayit, take her through Shar Nicanor to the gate of Nicanor. We're going to be there. And Shesham Mashkinat HaSotot, that's the place where they give the water to the Sotah women to drink. Because it says Lifnei Hashem, they should be before God. Why specifically there? Also, we're going to see they're going to take off some of her clothes, and it's going to be, you definitely don't want her in the Azara. And Mitarim Yoldot, the Yoldot, when they bring their sacrifices, they stand there also. We're going to get to all this in the Gemara and not in today's stuff, while these people were in that place. And Mitarim Mitzora'im. They would do the purification process of the leper, because the leper can't go in until they bring their sacrifices, but they had to take some of the blood and some of the oil from the libations there and put it on the ear and the finger and the toe of the leper. So he stands right there at Shar Nicanor on the entrance into the Azara. It's mamash. There's the Ezrat Nashim, which is generally where women were allowed to go just until there. Sometimes there were exceptions where women could go into the Azara, and that would be the entrance from Shar Nicanor into the Azara, where there's Ezrat Yisrael, a narrow part where Yisraelim could come, and then where only Kohanim could go. That's the Ezrat Kohanim, and that's where the Mizbech is, and then the Heichal is in there and all that. So now, what happens? She stands there. The Kohen, now we get to a very shocking part of the process. If you didn't know these Mishnayot, then you're going to be surprised. If you did know them and you forgot them, you'll be surprised as well. Kohen ochez b'bgadia. The Kohen holds on to her clothes. Okay, you think everything we know about tzniut and men touching women, right? This all goes out the window here, probably in a way to totally humiliate her, because she humiliated herself before. Now we're going to humiliate her. So he grabs her clothes. These are two types of tearing. If he tears them not on the seams, or if he tears them on the seams, the clothes get torn. Until her heart is revealed. What exactly that means? Maybe above her breast, maybe not exactly clear. And he takes off her hair covering, right? That's a parat Rosh Hashanah in the Torah. It says they uncover her hair. Not only that, he takes out the braid that is in her hair. Okay, he undoes it. Again, a very strange thing to think about, this going on in the middle of the temple, him doing this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, this is a very strange line. If her heart, or wherever we mean, was beautiful, I don't know who determines this, lo hayam galei, they wouldn't reveal that area. Okay, we're going to talk about this in the Gemara later, not in today's daf, but further on, how this works exactly. What are we worried about? Who's seeing? All that. And if her hair was beautiful also, they wouldn't undo her braid. Okay, so again, who decides according to Rabbi Yehuda is a really good question. This absolute, is there such a thing as absolute beauty, relative? Very hard to know. If she was wearing white clothes, then she wears black clothing. Talk about later, there's a break that says if she normally wore black, then she wears white. Okay, we change her clothes. This seems to be actually happening before they tore her clothes. What clothes was she wearing when she came into them? So she was wearing basically disgusting clothes, is what we want to say, or not respectful clothes. If she had gold jewelry on her, turning out on the bed, this was a choker necklace, nizamin, right, nose rings or earrings, vitabaot, and rings. We take all her jewelry off. Again, the whole idea is kidei lenavla, to make her look disgusting, or just, not respectful. We'll talk later about this chevel mitzri. They would take a rope, an Egyptian rope, which is made out of the fibers of the palm tree, and he ties it, again, a very strange thing. The Kohen's tying this over her breasts to make sure that her clothes cover the basic parts of her body that need covering. Anybody who wants to come see the spectacle is invited to come. Other than her slaves, male and female. Why? This is Canaanite slaves, because she's arrogant toward them. Like she won't admit. The whole idea is we want her to admit before we have to erase God's name in the water. So because of that, we basically make sure that we don't have people there that are going to cause her to kind of be arrogant and not be willing to admit in front of them. All women are allowed to see her. This is a little strange. And we just say anyone who wants to come can come. What about women? What weren't they included previously? The Gemara, again, later is going to talk about this in the next daf. This is a pasuk in Yechezkel. It says basically all the women will see and they'll learn from her. We basically want to make a spectacle of this so that people learn this is not the proper behavior. Gemara starts off Manani Mile. Where do we learn that you have to go to the Beit Din Gadol, not to just a regular court? It has to be the one in Jerusalem, right? The one in the Sanhedrin that we call the Sanhedrin was 71 people. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Gamda, Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina, Atya Torah Torah. Tiv ha'chava sala kohen et kol haTorah. Uchtiv ha'ta matpil Torah asher yorucha by the Zakei Mamre. This is a rebellious elder who basically is in the court and goes against the court ruling. So mala halam b'shivim ve'achad, avkam b'shivim ve'achad. Just like there, it has to be 71, and it says Torah. Also here, it says Zot Torah to Sotah, and from there they learn it's asala kohen et kol Torah. They learn there that it's the same thing. Okay, that there has to be 71. Also here, okay, you could think while you're preparing for Pesach about the connection between Zakei Mamre and a Sotah. They're both rebellious, right? One rebels against the system, one rebels against their husband. Maybe that's a direction. Anyway, I didn't have time to think about it, but you can think about it on your own. That idea just popped into my head right now, so it hasn't been developed yet. Ma'amin aleh. So now they start threatening her. And they say, right, they're threatening her because they want her to admit. Problem is, Uraminu, this contradicts another source. This source says, just like they threaten her not to drink, they also encourage her to drink. Which is weird. Didn't we just say we don't want her to drink? How do they do that? According to this Tanaitic source, they say, our daughter, if it's clear to you that you're innocent, don't be worried. Just drink this water. Nothing will happen to you. It's just like putting a dry drug on, or a dry, ointment on fresh skin. If you put on your skin and there's an injury, it'll go in and it'll heal it. If there's no injury at all, nothing's going to happen. So here you see they're encouraging her to drink the water. They're basically saying, don't be nervous. Nothing's going to happen to you if you're innocent. Lo kashya. Before they erase the Megillah of them, where they write the text on in the water, so we want to do everything to avoid that from happening. But obviously, once it happens, then we actually don't want to make it happen for no reason. So we actually want her to continue to drink the water, and then we have to encourage her to drink the water. So it's at different stages of the process. Now, you say these things that, almost like we shouldn't be saying them. What are they? Well, Tanu Rabbanan. We say there are things that people have done in the past. We're going to see what that is right now. There's things that there were wise people who said them and they didn't hide them from their ancestors. What are these? Well, Yehuda, Hoda v'lo bosh. They basically bring them examples of people who admitted to their sins. Who did they bring? Yehuda. Yehuda admitted to a sin. We'll see soon where, right? With Tamar, we'll talk about it. Mehayasofo, what did he gain from doing this? He got a place in the world to come. Reuven, Hoda v'lo bosh. Reuven also admitted to his sin and wasn't embarrassed. Okay, where's that? What sin? Well, it says in the Pasuk, Vayishkav Reuven et Bilha. Right? He slept with Bilha, his father's concubine. Now, some people say he didn't actually sleep with her. He just moved the beds around so that instead of going to Bilhah's tent, he went into Leah's tent, his mother's tent, right? The idea was Yaakov would go into his mother's tent. But either which way, whatever he did, whatever his sin was, it was a bad thing. And he apparently admitted he had done it. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in the Pesukim he admitted it, so we're going to have to figure this out. So now they say, what was his reward for admitting it? He also got a place in the world to come. And what's their reward? Which the Gemara says, what? The Braita just said what their reward was. Why is the Braita asking what's their reward? Mascharan kitikamrinan. You just said they both got a place in the world to come. Ela mascharan ba'olam hazeh. No, what we meant to ask is, what did they get in this world? Okay, we understand they got a place in the world to come, but what was their reward in this world for admitting? Lahem levadam yitzna aretz v'lo avar zar b'tocham. So this is a pasuk from Eov that they're saying was referring to Reuven and Yehuda. They alone got the land, and no one else went between them. So some of the explanations, there's different explanations. One is to say Yehuda got the Malchut, and the Malchut was in his domain, and Reuven got to go in first to the land. So the Ish got something, and no one else got what they got. Because Reuven got there first, because he lived on the other side of the Jordan. So we see where makes sense. Yehuda, he admitted, right after she brings out, we're going to get into the whole story in detail in a few more days. Drashot, we're getting to a few pages full of drashot. So we're going to talk about Yehuda and Tamal. But right in there it says she pulls out his stuff, right? They're about to burn her because she was it's clear she's pregnant and she wasn't, she was supposed to do Yibum and no one did Yibum with her. So really she was a zonah. And that we're going to burn her. And it turns out it was Yehuda, right? And she pulls out his stuff and he says, they're mine. Sadkami men. She says, she's right. She understood and I didn't. And he admits he was wrong. Ela Reuven and Nalan Ode. How do we know that Reuven admitted his sin? Well, the Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar of Yochanan, we're now going to darshan the psukim when Moshe gives the bracha to Reuven and Yehuda. So he says, starts off, Yechi Reuven va'al yamot. Okay, my dechtiv, what is the meaning of? Yechi Reuven v'al yamot, right? Reuven should live and will not die. V'zot liYehuda, meaning why are Reuven's brachot coming first and then Yehuda right after? And why does Yehuda start with v'zot liYehuda? And this is for Yehuda. Seems weird. So they say the following. Kol otam shanim shayu Yisrael b'midbar. Presumably the Jews in the desert had the bones of all the brothers with them. The one we really know about from the Psukim is Yosef's bones. And in fact, we're also going to get to drashot on that in a few days. But here we're going to talk about the bones of Yehuda were apparently in the desert with them. And the bones of Yehuda were megulgalim ba'aron. They were rolling around in the coffin. They weren't together. They were kind of broken. They were rolling about. Something was not right. Ad she'amar Moshe bikesh alav rachamim. Amar lefanav. So then came Moshe in the brachot, and we're going to basically read this first pasuk of the bracha of Yehuda as a drasha, a conversation between God and Moshe, or Moshe and God. So it says here, B'zot liYehuda, I'll read the whole pasuk. Vayomer, Shema Hashem kol Yehuda. Okay, V'yomal, Shema Hashem kol Yehuda. It will be said that God heard the voice of Yehuda. Ve'elamot to the end, when he will bring him to his nation. Yadav rav lo, his hands will be great, meaning like he'll be able to fight. Ve'ezer mitzarav tien, he will be able to defeat his enemies. Okay, so what does this mean? So first they read B'zot liYehuda. He says to the following. Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, mi garam leReuven shehoda? Yehuda. Who caused Reuven to admit his sin? It must have been Yehuda, because when he saw Yehuda admitted his sin, Reuven decided, I'll admit my sin. Well, v'zot liYehuda, this is what you're giving to Yehuda. In other words, all the other brothers, their bones were fine, and he's rolling around here in his coffin. Miyad shama Hashem kol Yehuda. So immediately, now we start with the next words in the pasuk. God heard the voice of Yehuda, and therefore al evrei l'shafa, all his limbs went back into place. But he still didn't get up to the yeshiva in the heavens. The elamo to the end. So Moshe continues, bring him to his nation, right? Bring him up there to the yeshiva, wherever all the other brothers are. So God brought him up there, but he still didn't know how to argue. Like he wasn't good at arguing the arguing of Torah. So Yadav Rav Lo. So Moshe says, Yadav Rav Lo, give him the strength to fight. Okay, so he gave him the strength to fight. But still, nobody was ruling like him. So he was fighting, but he wasn't winning any of the Torah battles. He will win out over his enemies. So basically, right, which is explained here as the fight of Torah, and he will win it. So basically, that's all that's the story. This was all to say that Reuven must have admitted it. He must have learned it from Yehuda, and that's why Moshe says, V'zot liYehuda, this is what you're giving him, that his bones are wobbling around there. Bishlama Yehuda da'od. We understand why Yehuda admitted. He didn't want Tamar to be burned, right? In other words, if he didn't admit, Tamar was going to be burned as a prostitute. So he had a motivation. Ela Reuven, why would Reuven admit? Not only he needed a motivation, but all the more so. Anyone who goes and admits his sins in public is chatzuv. It's arrogant. It's like saying that it's okay to sin. We don't want you airing out all your stuff in public. This is also very interesting. Same idea of the Sotah. Don't go doing that in public, right? It's a very public display. It's not something we approve of. Very interesting that this line appears right here. So, they didn't want, this happens in school all the time, right? Someone does something wrong, the teacher doesn't know who does it wrong, and basically either she wants to punish everybody, or she's going to punish the biggest troublemaker in the class, just assume it was that kid. And really, it was someone else. So if you did it, right, one of your motivations to admit is that you know the teacher's going to punish someone else instead of you, and that's motivation. And that's why Reuven did it, that Yaakov wouldn't suspect his brothers for having been involved. Okay, last part for today. Imam Rat Me'ani. What did we say? If in the end she says, I'm guilty, and she admits, then she writes this receipt for the ketubah. Well, Shmat Mina Kotvin Shoval, we're going to learn from here that we write Shovalim. Generally, how does it work? If let's say I loan you money. So I keep the deed, the shtar, and you are supposed to pay me back. I bring out the shtar. I say you didn't pay me back. As soon as you pay me back, we rip the shtar. You make sure the shtar is ripped. Otherwise, I could go claim double. I could take it back twice. Say, hey, here's my. If you have to write a shovar, then we could say, let's say I lose that document and I want to get the money back. So I go to you and you say, no, unless you have a document, you can't prove it. So sorry. But if there's such a thing of kotvim shovar, that we write receipts, then I could say to you, pay me back. Oh, you don't have a receipt that you paid me? Well, then I'm in the right. I might have lost my document, but you're supposed to produce the receipt. So the truth is that according to halacha, generally we say that it's on the mal that a loaner, the one who loaned the money, he's supposed to keep that shtar. We don't generally say you have to write receipt. This seems to imply, because what's a ketubah? Ketubah is money he owes her. Her shovar basically says, you don't owe me the money because I admitted that I committed adultery, and therefore, basically, you don't owe me the money. But theoretically, they should have just ripped up the ketubah. That would have been the way to do it. We don't generally write these receipts. And then, of course, she can't ever demand the ketubah. She owes the ketubah until she gets the money. He makes sure now, when she admits, they rip up the ketubah. So Rava says, I'm Rabbanit Michelle Farber. That's really what it means. Shoveret doesn't mean shoval, a receipt. No, change the word, get rid of the word shoveret, write mikara. She tears it. He tears it, right? They tear the ketubah. Amalei Rava, v'hashoveret katani. But it says, she writes a shoval. It doesn't say mikarat. Ela amarava b'mkom she'en kotvim ketubah askinan. Rava said they must be in a place, if you remember from Masechet Ketubah, those who learned it, there were many times where ketubah wasn't written at all, because ketubah is what we call it Tanai Beitin. It's such a given that a woman has a ketubah, she has rights to when in marriage, that you don't even have to write a ketubah. So in this case, there is no shtar that she could pull out to say, I owe you the money, you owe me the money, in which case the only thing we have here is a shoval. So she would have to write a shovar and give it to him, and that way she can't ever claim, oh, you divorced me, but I never got my ketubah money. He pulls out this receipt and says, what do you mean? Of course you didn't get your ketubah money, you don't deserve your ketubah money, and here it's in writing. So it doesn't prove anything about, in general, collecting documents and whether you need to write a receipt if you pay someone back money. Okay, that's it for today. We'll get started tomorrow with Amalina to the Shar Mizrach and why the Mizrach and how the order and where they went, etc. With that, I will wish everybody a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. And the shiurim for Chag are up already, so you can learn them in advance. The shiurim are up until the end of this week, until Shabbat. And next week, the same will be. I'll put up the shiurim in advance, and then you can learn them at your leisure throughout the week whenever you find the time. Wishing everybody a Chag Sameach.